So onto fossil fuels and nuclear energy. So these are obviously the not very nice ones out of all the energy generations, but unfortunately they are the most prevalently used still at the moment. So here we go. Generally, how they work: stuff is heated up, whatever that stuff is, whether it's coal, oil, gas, whatever. It's heated up in a furnace or it's burned. That then heats up water that is pumped into the power station. That water then vaporizes, and as it vaporizes, it creates pressure, which can then be used to turn a turbine, which then generates electricity. And the turbine works by literally having magnets that pass each other. And as the magnets pass each other, it generates a little bit of charge, and that charge is fed out, into the transmission lines and transformer, and that's all fed out into the grid. So that's very crudely how power stations generally work. Now, the majority of power stations, like I said, in the UK, are coal-based. In Hong Kong, the ones that we have here, from my knowledge, are Lama Power Station, and there's another one up near the airport, and or maybe in Chunwan or something. But those ones are also coal-based. And so they're big old dirty machines, and it's a very outdated technology. So humans have been generating electricity. In fact, no, I would go as far as to say we've been generating energy using coal for hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, we've used it as a heating source for hundreds of years, whether it's been domestic fires in houses to stay warm, or gradually to create steam. So, steam engines, and when steam technology became a big thing in the Industrial Revolution, and then we worked out how to use it to generate electricity. So, yeah, it's a resource that we very much need to move away from, because it's really dirty and it's horrible. But anyway, it is used for a huge amount of the world's electricity supply, or energy generation generally. So coal is mined, and this can be from shallow level or deep level mines. Now, yes, mining is obviously very hazardous in itself. Less so now, because a lot of it, more of it's done by machine. But back in the day, like, mining was almost like a death sentence, being sent down the mines, because there's a huge amount of soot down there, and you wouldn't have had proper respirators or anything like that. So, people would have been getting loads of coal dust in their lungs and stuff. I'm talking a long time ago, like, over about 100 years ago. And, they come out with blackened faces and stuff, and it was awful. The life expectancy of miners was very, very low. But, it was this black gold that we mined out of the ground, because it was used for so many things. It was really dangerous. Like, coal mining was dangerous. Like, all it would take, miners back in the day, they used lanterns, like little flame, like candles, so they could see. So imagine you're in this deep, deep, deep underground, and you are digging with a pickaxe. Like, you're just digging with a pickaxe. You're hacking coal off the side of the wall. Now, imagine this: like, when mining operations happen, there's always like pockets of gas trapped in the coal, in cracks in the coal, and often this gas is like methane or something. So, literally pure methane. So what often happened, which was devastating, was that like fire, like explosions would happen in mine shafts, because a miner would be hacking away at the coal face, and then suddenly his pickaxe would hit a bit of coal, which he'd pull away, and that would reveal a large pocket of methane gas. And he's got his like candle flame lantern, and suddenly the whole thing would go boom, and that's an explosion in a concentrated chamber. The number of deaths caused by coal mining must be horrendous. We're talking hundreds of years ago for this, because a guy called Humphrey Davy, he invented the miner's lantern, which was a sort of explosion-proof mining lantern. Then miners started taking canaries down in cages, so the canaries could like sort of sense the gas before they could, because you can't smell it either. So, so it's a horrible industry. Luckily now, coal mining is done by machinery. Like, they just have these massive machines that go down and just grind against the coal faces, and that's where the expression comes from. If people say like, "Oh, I've been working at the coal face," that means they've been putting in a shift at work. Like, they've been working really hard, and that's because like coal mining was really hard work, literally backbreaking work. So uses now, it's coal is pretty much just used for electricity generation in power stations. Some countries still use coal as a source of heating. Now, this photo here, I've been to Mongolia a couple of times now, taking school trips there, but some of you might have been. But in Ulaanbaatar, there's a region of the city called the Gur district, and some of you might have been there. But the Gur district is, yeah, it's just a very, very poor neighborhood of the city, and it's I mean, I guess you call it a slum, but people live in Gurs, like the Mongolian tents, and a lot of them are not connected up to a power grid, and so the only way for them to heat their homes is by burning coal or wood. In their gurs, in the little burners they've got in there. So obviously all those exhaust fumes need to go somewhere. So yeah, so that's why this picture of Ulaanbaatar it's really polluted. It's like one of the most polluted cities in the world because the Gur district just generates all of this smoke and soot and stuff, and it flows down over the city, and so you get the city blanketed in this thick cloud of pollution. Which is what London would have been like back in sort of, I don't know, the 1930s or something, when before the power grid was really a big thing and people still use coal a lot to heat their homes and stuff in. You had all these chimneys and all these houses, like all these chimneys puffing smoke up into the atmosphere. So that's why they called it the smog in London, because it got so bad that you literally couldn't see, and it became dangerous. Like people couldn't see even 2 feet in front of themselves when they're walking down the street. So it's a nasty material that we need to move away from. Crude oil again is also another nasty one. I mean, yeah, I'm painting a bad picture of these fossil fuels for a reason, because sure, they are efficient and we've grown to rely on them. Well, they're not really that efficient, I suppose, but I mean, you could say that their energy density is fairly high. And crude oil is used for loads of different things. Like it's used for materials. I mean, when you look at what is extracted from, sorry, I'm just going to put a little, change that there. When you look at what's actually extracted from crude oil, it's scary. Like the number of materials. Like we're talking, like obviously polymers and plastics and rubbers, kerosene. Sorry, my brain's going. Petroleum, diesel, aviation fuels. Tons of stuff, and obviously loads of other chemicals that are used for all sorts of different things. So they're called fractions because they're fractioned off when you do when you fractionally distillate crude oil. Like the different fractions come off at different temperatures, and those are the things that they extract from it. So crude oil is horrible because the way it's extracted is through drilling. So whether that's in the ocean or in the desert or in land, and wherever you have a massive drill, it's going to cause all sorts of problems and it's going to destroy the local habitat. And because you need access in and out of it, and if it's on the sea, you need these oil rigs, and there's a massive, this highly combustible oil. So there's this huge risk of fires happening. I mean, I find this image terrifying to look at. This enormous oil rig sinking and like just going up in flames because obviously like the oil caught fire and there's a big explosion that happens. So yeah, it's scary. So I mean, the positives and the uses of it are that it is used, at least crude oil is used for a very wide range of applications. Like at least it's not just used for one thing. That's about it, I guess, from my point of view. I mean, it really, after that, it's just negatives because it's a pollutant. I mean, another massive thing with oils is like if there's an oil spillage, like if a big shipping container is transporting oil barrels, and then say if that ship has a problem or it crashes or something, and oil spills are devastating because animals like birds that sit on the water, like albatrosses, for example, they spend a lot of time sitting on the water and they naturally float. They're buoyant. But then, all it takes is to float into a field of oil that's spilt, and the oil sits on the surface of the water. So, and that is really thick, sticky stuff, crude oil. That then it gets stuck in all their feathers and stuff, and then they can't fly after that. So it's horrible, and fish will ingest it as well. And the argument is that eventually it will make its way back to us as well, because fish get it. A lot of fishing happens, obviously, and then we'll end up ingesting fish which has been exposed to crude oil and that kind of thing. So sorry, I'm not painting a positive picture at all, but I think it's because there is not much positive to say about this stuff. Natural gas, is mined in a very sorry is extracted in a very similar way to crude oil. You need a drill, and they need to identify where the gas pockets are, and then and then they will drill down and they'll extract the gas. And I mean, there's different types, but there's like sort of butane gas and propane gas and stuff. And yeah, and if I mean things like cookers, for example, if you live in an apartment, you've got a gas hob. There's only one gas supplier in Hong Kong called Town Gas, and that's literally just like I think it's propane gas that they distribute, and that's burnt, and and that's good for cooking with. But gas is dangerous. Like it's pretty dangerous having gas being piped to houses and residences, because it's obviously highly combustible, and all it would take is for one person to just leave the gas hob on, and then suddenly, like, boom, like if it hits a naked flame, or even if from turning a light switch on, there's a very tiny spark when a switch makes a circuit, that's enough to ignite like a gas cloud. So it's dangerous stuff. Yeah. So okay, nuclear power. This is one that has a lot of controversy around it. It's actually a very efficient form of electricity generation. The reason being is that uranium rods that are used as the fuel to generate the heat last a very, very long time. Because I think the actual radiation in them lasts for a huge amount of time. So so the nuclear reactor can keep running for ages and ages and ages. Now, there's some very obvious, very, very large downsides to nuclear reactors and nuclear power. When it works well, it's very clean because there's no exhaust fumes from it. There's only steam that comes out, and it generates a lot of energy. And the rods last a long time. That's the really good side of them. Certain countries around the world use a lot of nuclear power. Like I think Japan uses a huge amount of nuclear power. And some people argue that, like, the reason that the skies can be so clear in countries like Japan is because they have relatively clean energy generation. Now, the big problems start with this is what happens to the uranium rods when they burn out and they need to be replaced. There's not really much that can be done with them. So, I mean, what they literally do is they just have to they dig really deep underground, and they chuck all the uranium rods like deep underground, or in water or something like that. So that I mean, I'm just looking for a picture of it now. It's kind of crazy. Like you can see is this here we go. So this is kind of interesting to see. I've not actually seen this before, but you can see here's like an image of like it's obviously just like a liquid tank, and just all the uranium rods get put in there, because water is a very good defender against like radiation and stuff. So or if you get a nuclear meltdown like in Chernobyl or something, what they literally have to do is just build concrete around the whole thing, and then concrete is also a very good insulator as well against radiation. But if radiation leaks out, obviously the consequences are devastating. So it's incredibly dangerous. It's literally like playing with fire, like using nuclear power. So that's why it's so much controversy around using it.